in the squadron. They called him Bullets, but we call him Greg Kelly. Greg Kelly is on the air
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. And I have in my hands some things that just a couple of days ago were ultra classified, top secret. You'd be in trouble. You'd be going to jail if you had them, if you talked about them with your wife. And now I can share them on the radio with everybody. It's fascinating to look at. It's not exactly easy to look at. It's not the most scintillating reading. For most of it, you got to wade through a lot. And then all of a sudden, you're like, uh-oh, wait a second. This is very, very, very important. And this, oh my gosh, somebody should probably go to jail for doing something like this. So here's the big issue. All right, look. Number one, everybody remembers in 2016 and for 2017, 18, 19, Russia. Oh my God, Russia wanted President Trump elected president. Russia did everything it could to help President Trump. They did all this stuff. They colluded with the Trump campaign. Now, number one, they didn't collude. And number two, actually, we do not know if they wanted President Trump. There's a lot of reasons why they didn't want President Trump. They wanted Hillary Clinton because she was stable, and they had a huge dossier on her going back to 1978. They had the goods on her, and they had the goods on Bill. They didn't really see President Trump as a future president, so they didn't take him all that seriously until it was too late. Then they were jumping through hoops trying to get intel on this guy, and they didn't have much. Now, one of the many, many crimes that you haven't heard enough about is that the intelligence community, after the election of President Trump, the intelligence community, and by that I mean at Barack Obama's direction, they cooked the books. And they made it seem as though the Russian intelligence under Vladimir Putin had an express interest in seeing President Trump elected president. That is not true, but they changed the evidence to suggest as much. Now, Russia, like every other country on earth, dabbled. They dabbled in elections overseas. Imagine, what's a good analogy? You know, I tweet from time to time. I used to be a lunatic on Twitter. I've dialed it down a little bit, but I tweet. And basically, tweeting, countries would tweet. They would tweet the equivalent. Did I determine the outcome of the 2016 election or the 2022 election or the 2024 election? Of course not. But I'd screw around. I'd say stuff. I say provocative things. I would say things that I believe to be true, and I would mix it up online. That's what countries do a little bit. Even before Twitter, it was similar to Twitter. You know, today we can tweet. Back then, you'd have to get somebody to write an article for you, or you'd sit down and write an article, or you might start a rumor about somebody. Hey, now this is abhorrent today, but people would often spread rumors about one's sexuality. You know that Scoop Jackson is gay. Who the hell's Scoop Jackson? Nobody remembers, but he was a pretty big deal in 50 years ago. And the KGB put out a rumor that he was gay. They also put out a rumor that Ronald Reagan wanted to blow up the world, and they wanted to help Jimmy Carter. Just happens in every single election. It's been happening actually since the 1700s, for crying out loud. I saw a beautiful speech. A guy actually said out loud that's what, there's all kinds of history about this. John Adams, they were worried about the French. George Washington, in his farewell address, told everybody, heads up, foreigners are going to try to mess with this country in our elections. But they acted like it was the biggest thing in the world in 2016 when it wasn't. It was fairly routine, and it was actually fairly benign. But they obviously pretended it wasn't. So 2016 changed the game a little bit. Anything foreign, well, it should have been, but it wasn't. Anything Russian that may have been not helpful to Democrats was seen as a threat to democracy. But anything Chinese that harmed President Trump wasn't worth mentioning, wasn't even worth putting into intelligence reports. You had to downplay it. You had to look the other way. You had to say, oh, no. Let's talk about Russia. So I have these key documents here. And there are two types of things they're talking about, all right? Now, I know it gets a little bit weedy, but what they wanted to say, because you couldn't deny that China was up to stuff about the election, but what the intelligence community that hates President Trump was pushing, they're only talking about issues. They're only talking about issues. They're not talking about the election. They're trying to promote certain issues and causes they're interested in, but they had no real opinion on the election. Well, the good guys in the intelligence community knew that that wasn't true, that they had a clear preference for President Biden. They wanted Biden to win that election because President Trump was tougher on them. And this is what comes through in all of these documents. And there is a war going on, and let's see here. I'm going to show you 1 second here. All right. I guess this is the best. Is this the best? No. Stay with me. Let's see here. All right. Thanks for your response, Matt. Much of your new suggested language is fine, but it doesn't actually address our concern about redacted. Yes, redacted is dated. That's the point. We disagree with your comment on parallelism. The language on Russia and Iran includes preferences because it describes efforts to support or denigrate one candidate over the other. The graphic is about the election, so it seems odd to exclude intelligence community coordinated language on Beijing's view on it. I also asked the redacted analyst to add language on aims or preferences to the extent they have anything to say there. I also think there's a contradiction in your suggestion. You say definitively at the beginning that Beijing is not trying to sway the outcome, but then later include our language saying that redacted. So does that make sense? The same kind of data and evidence, and they're totally fine saying Russia and Iran is trying to screw with the election and that they favor one candidate over the other. But when it comes to China, you guys don't want to say it. Why is that? So here's a counter proposal to try to find common ground. This is all intelligence community documents, people arguing with each other in the intelligence community about what the ultimate intelligence product should say. And what is the ultimate intelligence product? Something called the PDB, Presidential Daily Briefing, something that goes to the president. And clearly the intelligence community does not want the president to know, and at this point it's President Trump, they don't want him to know that China prefers Joe Biden because they don't trust President Trump to not make a big deal out of that. And by the way, it's his right to make a big deal out of that. If you guys are going to make a big deal about Russia, which is not true, by the way, but you did, I can make a big deal about Joe Biden. So here's the language that they propose. We assess that China prefers that the president does not win re-election, but we have redacted. Alternatively, we assess that China is not at this time trying to influence the outcome of the presidential election in favor of one candidate over another, redacted. In this assessment, because it is based on redacted, we assess Beijing uses extensive lobbying, economic measures, information derived from computer network exploitation, and increasingly strident rhetoric to, redacted, press U.S. officials and federal and local candidates to support China's positions and perspectives. So it goes all into the other language. They're fighting to get this language put in. We assess that China prefers that the president does not win re-election, but we have, and then that's it. That's the only line they want. And they're getting the runaround on this. They're getting all kinds of pushback. Let's see here. Something else from someone to someone. We don't have the name. Thanks for putting the pro-China influence actors sentence back in the paragraph. For that one, we ask that you use the sentence we provided. Unidentified pro-China influence actors have been spreading English language videos on U.S. social media platforms that criticize the president's policies, promote socially divisive themes, and denigrate him. We think we need to acknowledge the partisan nature of some of that content. So this is still a work in progress. You know, they couldn't get the language in, and then they got it in, and then they got it kicked out again. Let's see here. Something else. Now, this is the pushback. Some other intelligence guy writes, we believe our evidence for China not interfering in the U.S. election is stronger than you are acknowledging. We can and should make a judgment call about whether China is interfering, not leave it up to the reader to read between the lines. Redacted should not be used to justify a conclusion that it could be happening, but we just don't see it. This sets an artificially high bar for evidence that we must possess empirical evidence to disprove any possible alternative outcome. Man, talk about bureaucratic gobbledygook doing backflips so you cannot make this report say what's really happening. In this case, we actually do possess positive evidence about China's intent, and it suggests China probably is not interfering in the election. Don't you have to err on the side of caution? Don't you have to err on, like, there's information here, we have to include it? No, they're saying we have information, but don't include it. That's dangerous. China's influence efforts to shift public opinion on particular policy issues are not the same as election interference, nor are they intended to influence the election. We object to language that blurs the line between these two activities and implies interference is happening without stating it directly. They're trying to help Joe Biden, and they're trying to hurt President Trump by not giving him potentially an issue that works in his favor. Look, I don't care who you are. It's going to have some sort of impact on you if you think that Russia is rooting for one candidate or China is rooting for one candidate. So that's what these things set out. Document after document. I am concerned about politics seeping into this. There's no reason we can't say we have blank confidence. They have. Okay, we already did that one. As I'm sure many of you have gathered through the coordinated comments, COI discussions, or other conversations, NIO Cyber and I have a somewhat different take on the China election story than what has appeared in production so far. Rather than continue to argue about this and drive you all nuts, we are opting to publish an alternative analysis national intelligence memo. We think this is the best way for us to put our perspective on the record while not getting in the way of what the rest of the community wants to say. The lead, in short, non-compartmentalized form, is that we assess that Beijing has taken some low-level exploratory steps to denigrate the president and shape voter perceptions ahead of the election. They would not put this in the report. The other people won, and President Trump never saw this. I have other people boasting that they got the presidential daily brief massaged to such a point that the China stuff was totally taken out. Here's something else. October 6, 2020. From Redacted at the DNI, the Directorate of National Intelligence, to Redacted at the NSA, National Security Administration. Hi. Thanks to you for sharing your thoughts in the last COI meeting. It sounded to me like your take on this is at least somewhat similar to ours. I felt like jumping in to agree with you, but I burned enough political capital arguing with CIA and FBI about this, and I thought it might be more productive for me to sit out the discussion. How about that? Office politics. Do you have national security information that could help the country or not? No, you got office politics. Wouldn't want you wasting all your capital there, bro. The positions are not really that far apart, so I'm not sure why so many in the community want to close down the possibility that China might have done or be doing something. But hopefully this piece sparks more thought and discussion. What a horrific bureaucracy. Way too big, way too bloated, and way too much power. We're going to fix it. Be right back.
Greg Kelly
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Ooh, some good ones here. Alana, are you there? Hello? Is she there? Oh, shoot. Take your thing off mute. Are you there? Damn it. Alana doesn't think that we landed on the moon. I know we landed on the moon. But you know what? Not believing that we went to the moon has gone very, very kind of mainstream. It used to be the freakish thing, the most freakish thing to say. It was embarrassing. But now people are saying that all over the place. Hey, did we fix it, Carlos, or no? No? Yes, no? Just talk to me. No? No good? No good, right? No? None? All right, whatever you got to do. I have looked at all these documents, and you know what really breaks my heart? Nobody else has. Nobody else has. My friend Eric Eggers has. Peter Schweitzer, John Solomon. They have. I have. And when I see it, and I see what they, it's wonderful to be accessing the truth in black and white. How can anybody who calls themselves a supporter of President Trump, who has a media job, just pretend this is not there? This is dynamite stuff. It's everything I thought was going down in real time. And it makes me even angrier at that Chris Krebs character. Chris Krebs on Face the Nation yesterday comes out, and you can, in my opinion, you can kind of tell he's lying. You can kind of tell there's little signs of deception, little things that he does. That's, hey, do me a favor, if you don't mind, pick up where I was with the Face the Nation, Chris Krebs, little slimy guy, little swamp hero, who falsely said it was the most secure election ever. Never, ever, ever should have said that. Totally a fireable offense. Pick it up, please, Carlos.
Have a plan within 30 days. We are 100 days out from the midterms.
Yeah, and in 2020, we had our CISA election security plan out in February of 2020.
So before we move on to the current day, just to put a fine point on this for you, Chris. So during his first few months in office, the president issued executive order against you, saying you promoted the censorship of election information, and he claimed you dismissed election malfeasance and serious vulnerabilities with voting machines. In Intel speak, what you saw, interference would be hacking, changing some of the language the president used in those on-camera remarks. What you saw, how would you describe the Chinese role in the 2020 election?
Well, I think there was an honest debate and discussion across the intelligence community about what China's intent were. But ultimately, when it came out in the intelligence community assessment that was released in the spring of 2021, it was that China had a preference and that they were not in favor of President Trump, but their efforts were principally limited to influencing the American public.
Stop. Spring of 2021. President Trump was already gone. You see that?
Greg Kelly, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
But you did not vote for Mondani to be the mayor.
I did not, actually.
Because you do not like him.
That's true.
But because he does not like you. But who started this?
Who started what?
Who started not liking him? Who started the fight?
A guy named Sid Rosenberg. He's my friend at work.
But who started the fight that Mondani does not like you and you do not like the mayor?
Well, it's possible to not like somebody and not have a fight. Just talking politics with my 6-year-old.
A
lot of wisdom there, huh? Who started this after all? But who started it? I just love it. I love being a father. I am the smartest person for now in my home. For now, for the time being. Actually, I would never want to compare my IQ with my wife's. She's totally brilliant. As is our next guest, Eric Eggers. Haven't talked to him in a while. Too long. Co-host of the Drill Down podcast with Peter Schweitzer. Also, another great podcast he's doing with Susan Crabtree. He's all over the place. Great associate of Peter Schweitzer. Welcome back, Eric. How are you?
Greg, I'm jealous. Enjoy the time of being at least one of the top 2 smartest people in your home with a child that's 6. I have an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a soon-to-be 13-year-old, and I can assure you your place in the intellectual stratosphere is sure to descend. At least mine has. Maybe you're a much better father than me, but enjoy this time. It's very sweet.
Well, I can't let them know any of that. I have to create the illusion that I am top dog. How are you, Eric? Eric, have you gotten a good look at these documents that President Trump put out the other night?
I have. I've gotten a look at the documents. I was fortunate to kind of be on the early end of a briefing before they made this presentation. And more importantly, I heard you call into a podcast we both like, and I think offer a little bit of a gentle rebuke to your friend Mark Halperin, because he should have spent a little bit more time on it on his program on Friday. And I would say, as interesting and as newsworthy as Donald Trump's presentation was on Thursday night, I think the presentation by DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin in terms of the statistics, the number of illegal immigrants they found registered to vote in only 4 different states, and more importantly, the juxtaposition of how the intelligence community responded to Chinese hacking in our country in 2020 versus what the Biden administration did specifically to the Chinese hacking in another country in 2024 is a massively unreported story. And so it's a credit to you and your programs you won't talk about it.
Well, thank you very much. And I do love that two-way podcast. But I got to tell you, it's not just, dominant media. Conservative media, and I got friends over there at Fox, but I was not surprised, actually, because I've seen them do this before. Fox News Sunday, their signature show, did not address these documents. I think Hannity and Bret Baier, I don't know what they did. I'm pretty sure it was nothing or next to nothing. Conservative media often doesn't want to do the work. I forget how they feel about President Trump, and a lot of them are conflicted about him. Why do you think they're not pursuing this? I know dominant media, but what about conservative media?
If I had to guess, Greg, I think it's because of the lawyers. And I think that they all still are, they got a legal department that was on the wrong end of some decisions in the aftermath of 2020. So anything that raises questions about the validity or veracity of the 2020 election, and specifically data, and did some of these machines get hacked or whatever. I mean, I think that's what they're reacting to. But I got to tell you, we're actually going to do, Peter Schweizer and I are doing our podcast tomorrow on this very topic. And it's interesting that no one wants to talk about it now, because 8 years ago, that was not the case. I actually remember they had a hackathon, this kind of confab of people. They bring people together to see if they could hack election machines. And in 2018 in Florida, an 11-year-old hacked into the equivalent of Florida's election system in 10 minutes. And it was national news. NPR and PBS did a big story about it. 2 years later in 2020, the headline from NPR, cyber experts warn of vulnerabilities facing 2020 election machines. And then even the Soros-funded Brennan Center did a whole release in 2018 about how vulnerable our machines were and our data was. So the fact that China, and a number of other countries who clearly want, and who've done it before, they did it in England in 2024, and the elections chief there just came out in the fall and said this set us back 3 years. So, I mean, these are real things. It's not some insignificant thing. And so, the fact that our intelligence community knew that China was doing this, ironically, China was able to acquire data that leftist-run blue states refuse to give the Department of Justice today. That's the headline. Everyone should be talking about it, but as far as why do conservative media not want to talk about it, I think they're a little gun-shy still because of certain lawsuit settlements.
Well, there are certain things, though, that it's A-OK and has nothing to do with litigation. I mean, you make this a story about the intelligence agencies, and we can see them arm wrestling behind the scenes. The bureaucracy does not want to put in the preference that China has for Joe Biden. And these debates are, and they want to keep that information from President Trump. We're massaging the presidential daily brief. They're boasting about it. This, this is still a free country, kind of, and we're allowed to question our intelligence agencies and the integrity. So I would hope that they would find their mojo and realize, who they are and where they are, and that these are valid, worthy questions to pursue, and you're not going to get in trouble for it. Let me ask you the following. Yes, you mentioned the data breach, China, buying or getting all that information. 220 million voter files. Now, one pushback I've heard on that is that, well, they could have bought that. That's commercially available. Now, I don't know if that's true, but my first response would be, you can buy nitric acid as well. You can buy things to make a bomb, and that's why law enforcement is very kind of wary of purchases of certain kinds of things. But what do you know about whether or not China could have purchased this stuff, or do they hack to get it?
So first off, each state is different, and I actually had several phone calls today because I'm concerned about that same thought, and that's why I think, so number one, I don't believe it's true universally. Some states you could purchase the information, commercially, but some states you absolutely cannot, which is, by the way, why the Department of Justice is actively suing a number of states to get that data. So that, to me, is the headline. In fact, I was just looking at a letter that the Department of Homeland Security sent to New Jersey, and they said, we have identified 19,000 people whose names, birthday, and addresses match known non-citizens in our databases. We'd like you to run them through our system. We'd like you to kind of audit this and verify this and turn over your information. A number of states, Minnesota, Oregon, Washington, California, have refused to turn this information over. So if it was so easily obtainable, then why is Harmeet Dillon and the Department of Justice having to sue American governors and American secretaries of state to get the data? So to me, it's not true. It's a decentralized system. You have 50 laboratories of democracy. Each state has different rules about what they'll turn over. Some stuff is publicly available, but a lot of information, more specific details, are not. And so that actually is one of the cruel ironies about this, is that these blue states will turn over to the Soros-funded database known as ERIC, ironically, the information, but they won't give it to the federal government, who just wants to do this audit. So, I don't believe that's true, and I think that's one of the points that the Trump administration should be making more rigorously.
I think also that anything car-related, license plate numbers and license, on your licenses, the code, they're not commercially available under any circumstances, and it looks like a lot of that stuff was shared. I also don't like the grumbling about President Trump. Oh, he should have done it this way. He should have done it that way. I notice that people get very, very, especially conservatives, very snobby when it comes to messaging. DC in general, like, oh, the messaging is all wrong. The messaging is all wrong. Like, who cares? The message is the important part. I mean, how it was done. Do you know what I mean? It seems like most of the political dialogue in America is about messaging and who did. Anybody can have an opinion on messaging. There's no degree in messaging. You know what I mean? I can't stand all this messaging. And forget the messaging. Just get your head into the documents and see what's there. And it's amazing. Forgive me, but the messaging thing bothers me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think you hear a lot of the commentary about it being like, well, it was hard to follow. Okay, well, whose fault is that? I mean, whether it was laid out in a challenging way, you're either saying, I mean, yeah, maybe they could have presented it a different way, but you're just basically saying you're not smart enough to identify the real story here. And so absolutely. So it's a kind of a lazy way. It's like when you're in a college English class being asked about a book you didn't read. You're like, well, it reminds me of this other book, So I do. I think this is. I think it's meat on the bones. You've got John Solomon, you've got other people that have gone in there, and you've got this information. They're trying to find out what to declassify and what to release to the American people. And I just think it's like this is the first and what I think will be a number of steps. But to me, Greg, the fact that Homeland Security, and this is something that he gave a press conference about this Friday, but this has been an ongoing thing they've been doing for over a month now. They've put some very smart people in this office, my understanding is, and they're taking this very seriously, and they're leveraging the power of the purse, and they're telling states, listen, you will perform audits after the fact to make sure that the number of ballots cast actually match up with the number of votes that were counted. Or we're not going to give you these grants. So and you're going to run your voter rolls through the DHS citizenship database to make sure, as they're flagging New Jersey, they're saying we find 19,000 people we think are on your voter rolls with illegal immigrants. And listen, people are going to criticize them. Well, you haven't proven they've actually voted yet. If nothing else, I think America should be, we can be frustrated about having passed the Save America Act and all that stuff. But when you have the head of the Homeland Security giving a press conference saying, we are going to, if you register a non-citizen to vote, or if you're a non-citizen, you actually cast a ballot, we're going to go after it, we're going to look at it, we're taking it seriously, and we're going to prosecute to the full extent of the law. That's unprecedented. You know what I mean? That hasn't happened before at the federal level. And if nothing else, that will be a deterrent for all these socialist activist groups out there trying to register people on Skid Row and funnel all these extra ballots they're collecting through their ballot harvesting groups. I think that's a step. They're trying to figure out what they can actually get done before the election, and I think that's a good first step, and it's a warning shot, and I think there's more coming.
Excellent. Hey, do me a favor. Carlos, take this Face the Nation thing from the top, all right? You're about to hear Chris Krebs, who was the CISA director back in 2020. A very suspect guy, in my opinion. He's asked on the Face the Nation show about this presentation by the president and the documents. Go ahead and hit that for us, Carlos, would you please?
And for more on election security, we're joined now by CBS News contributors David Becker and Chris Krebs. Good to have you both here, because I want to download from both of you what we should be understanding about this past week. Chris, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, appointed you to run the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's CISA, that Senator Warner was just talking about, to help states protect their election infrastructure during 2020. That was a secure election, you said. The president fired you for saying that. This past Thursday, he again insisted it was not secure. Did you hear anything that changes your assessment?
Not at all. In fact, I would say that it further bolsters my confidence in the security of the 2020 election between what has been released, disclosed last week, and all the information and the results of court challenges and other things in the intervening 6 years. 6 years. But it's also, I think, a good opportunity to reflect on the good work that the millions of hundreds of thousands, if not million or more, election workers that helped execute the 2020 election, the tens of thousands of federal government employees that worked to protect the 2020 election. That was not something that came together a couple weeks before 2020. That was years in the making. And that work was solid.
All right, stop for a second. Mullins. This guy is dirty. This guy is dirty. And that was a clue right there, Eric. Tens of thousands of federal workers were involved in the elections. I can understand, maybe an office of this or that or the other thing, but I think he's dirty, and I think he's running scared right now.
Well, he's, by the way, not alone. There's a number of officials, both at the federal level, even in a state like Georgia, I'm sad to say, when you preside over something where a lot of questionable activity happens, you have two choices. And I think Chris Krebs and some of the officials in Georgia took the option of saying, no, the work we did is, as he said, solid. Because the alternative is to say, no, we messed up, we didn't secure the election, and fraud or a significant data breach or significant vulnerability was exploited on my watch. And they're never going to say that. So they have to double down. But let me just read you something. This came out in March of 2018. It said in two critical areas, the Brennan Center, which, by the way, is like this liberal funded, it gets money from Soros. They're always talking about how safe and secure, like a voter fraud doesn't happen, all this stuff. They said in two critical areas, the Brennan Center finds the country's been remarkably slow to act in replacing voting machines most vulnerable to hacking and mandating post-election audits that would allow the country to detect and recover from successful cyber attacks against those machines. And by the way, so this is some people, leftist groups, sounding the alarm 2 years before this happens. And, of course, if you're defending the 2020 election as being the safest and most secure thing, as we get kind of years later in the fog of COVID and all the crazy, ridiculous things that we allowed to happen then are lifted, that's not an island I want to be on. I think the number of people that are still there, good for CBS for finding one of the few people who still wants to defend that work. But I think most Americans can kind of look back and say, wait a minute, we cast the most ballots ever in the least secure way possible, and we now know foreign governments who wanted to do us harm, foreign governments who, of course, would have much preferred to do business with Joe Biden than Donald Trump, had access to these data rolls. You got machines that could be hacked by an 11-year-old in 10 minutes, and you got a guy with a white-collar haircut on national TV trying to defend it and say, no, everything was good. No one believes it. Doesn't pass the smell test. And I think more and more information is going to come out to further prove just how kind of nonsensical and silly some of those claims continue to be.
Yeah, and nonsensical and silly. We know everything that can be hacked. And then, oh my gosh, a voting system. If you say that, lawyer up, you're in trouble. Come on, give me a break.
No, one of these reports in 2018 said that the election systems were using software like Windows from 15 years ago. They said, I wouldn't use this on a hot dog vending machine. That's a real quote from an NPR article. I'm saying it.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's amazing, and it was all there, and they were ready to use it if the election was leaning the other way. Eric Eggers, we thank you very much. Tell Peter Schweitzer we say hello. That's going to be an awesome podcast. We can get it wherever we get our podcasts, right? The Drill Down?
Wherever you can get your podcast, or you can find out every episode and some other media clips at thedrilldown.com.
All right. Thank you, pal, very, very much. To be continued, and we'll be right back.
Greg Kelly, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
All right, we are back. Got some very interesting videos coming, and I guess I'm alone, almost alone, very lonely, actually, pursuing the truth as it comes to our intelligence communities, whether it's the election, whatever. I mean, what an opportunity, and I can't believe how many people are not availing themselves of this amazing opportunity to look at classified documents. I mean, it's great. It's great. Yes, Shawnee, how are you?
Oh, my gosh, I'm so glad to get in. I so admire I'm so grateful for your devotion to the country, your faith, your patriotism, and you're one of the few, if not the only one, that truth seekers like myself can go to. And for that, thank you. And I was wondering if you would consider making a sort of bullet points for idiots on these documents so that, most of us would just go through and get the real, nuggets.
Gosh, that's an interesting idea. I haven't thought about that. And sometimes I think I should. Well, not sometimes. I mean, look, I spend a lot of time myself trying to, internalize this information and understand it and then and I put it out on radio and television, but I have not thought about doing something possibly in print. What are the key takeaways? And there's an opportunity here because you're right. A lot of folks haven't been served that. So I will, and thank you for the recommendation. I'm going to do something by the end of the week. This is a great recommendation, Shawnee. All right, and I appreciate it very, very much. So kind of you. Thank you. Justin is standing by. Hi, Justin.
Greg, how you doing?
Good, man.
Listen, I'm honored to be the Republican nominee running for U.S. Senate in New Jersey to take on Cory Booker. I wanted to say hello to you in North Jersey on 77 ABC.
Are you really the nominee?
I am the nominee, Republican Party, United States Senate for New Jersey. We haven't elected a Republican, Greg, to serve in the U.S. Senate from New Jersey since 1972, and I hope we get to change that this November.
Justin, give me your last name again.
Murphy, Justin Murphy.
And let me see here. When's the election? Is this November? No, it's this November?
3rd, yeah, November 3rd. New Jersey has a U.S. Senate seat up right this year. I'm running against incumbent Cory Booker, and we hope to deal him a big upset.
How long have you been a candidate?
Well, we won the nomination on June 2nd.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a pro-life Reagan conservative. Always have been, always will be. Navy veteran, raised by a single mom, small business and self-employed all my life. Believe hopelessly in America and its promise. And we're going to take a good fight to Cory Booker this November. We're going to be for parental rights and school choice and a secure border and energy production, a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution. We're going to keep our military clean and strong.
All right. Now, let me ask you this. Sounds great. Justin Murphy, good luck. All right, there's the music. We got to go. But we'll do a formal interview with you. I hope you're serious about this. You're not just going through the motions, right?
We're doing it, my man. We're doing it. We're going to have a good fight here, and we absolutely will run you down on Newsmax and hope to see you soon.
All right, very good. Justin Murphy, everybody. Remember that name. Cory Booker, watch out. I would love it if this guy wins. See you later.
Thanks for listening to The Greg Kelly Show. You can hear The Greg Kelly Show weekdays at 12:15 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?